days in making the movie and really in the years before that led up to it, I just had enough experience of energy, of really getting viscerally what it means to be an energetic being and to be interacting constantly with vast energy and the possibilities that come from that. So I'll just give an example. I care about the wildlife being able to move along corridors, for their breeding and protection. And in the face of development, sometimes that's challenged. And when I understand that the, Union Bank of California funds the clear cutting, because it's owned by Mitsubishi, of those corridors, and I learned that, and then I move my money out into a local bank that's supporting a local community and not doing that, there's a congruence there for me. In the same way that when I have my thoughts and my intentions and I watch manifest, there's a congruence in that. So I feel really empowered and excited, I think, is what's happened for me in the course of all of this, to have more and more experience of what it feels like to recognize myself as an energetic being connected to source and in constant dialogue with that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but for me, I just feel alive and awake to it.
That's beautiful, Kimberly. Thanks so much. That was a big part of the movie for me. Most movies tend to get on with the information, but that was your grounding point at all times that we all kept coming back to. It really addresses that so well. And Foster, for you, what do you feel right now is kind of your highest excitement? What's going on?
The most exciting for me is that I feel more confident than ever that there is a way out of this lethal mess for humanity that we've gotten ourselves into. And though it's not simple, though it's not easy, it's actually very simple. And the deeper we go into these things, the more we see the simplicity and the coherence. And it's exactly on every level what you were doing with the meditation in the beginning. I think back to some of the travels that I've had to these inventors and healers. I was sitting at lunch in San Diego with one of the doctors, Dr. Todd, who was featured in the film. And he was telling me the results he was getting with these activating our own dormant stem cells. And I said, Todd, can you give me a little of the science? How do you do that? So he literally takes a napkin, starts drawing on the napkin. He says, there's this wave going this way. And if we get a wave going the other way and we tune them just right, there's this still point. And if you can create that still point, then this emanation goes out from that still point and awakens these dormant cells, and they just go about their healing. And then I'm sitting in Thailand with a team of inventors out in the rice paddies who've got a free energy device working. And I'm saying, how do you do this? And they said, well, if we get these coils right, you get these looped coils and you get them in the right geometry, you get them aimed toward the center, it creates this still point. And with only the coils, no plug into anything, we're generating 20,000 volts in that still point, and that's putting out 50 kilowatts of energy, something like that. And this is what we heard again and again and again, is that if you can be still in yourself, you can create stillness in your artifacts, then you create what a lot of the inventors called the straw, that actually taps the stillness at the center of every infinite amount of toruses. And as long as we don't violate it, the universe then through the field will give us exactly what we want and need. That to me is super exciting.
Yeah, that's brilliantly put. And I remember in the first movie, which leads me nicely into my first question, I think it's the torus field, yeah? And that would be, I suppose, the kind of still point. And the work of Nassim Haramein, we interviewed him a long time ago, actually, and we found him completely, unbelievable. We just couldn't fathom what he was saying. It was like he was on a different level. How did Nassim come into the movie? He's been in both movies, I remember, yeah? How did he come in, and what draws you to his work in particular?
Well, I'll take that one because Nassim and I have been friends for 23 years. Literally, he was traveling in a van with these piles of research, and literally one event from giving up because people didn't understand what he was talking about. And a friend had met him, and our work was so similar. They said, you've got to go to this one event and you got to meet this guy. So I went. From the moment he started talking, the hair went up on the back of my neck, and it just made total sense. A lot of the questions that I hadn't been able to answer, he was answering. I introduced myself afterward. We started working together the next day and have been colleagues ever since. And one of the first things that I asked him was, I said, so what are you doing here this lifetime? And he said, well, I've come to complete Einstein's work and to recreate the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm like, okay, I don't hear that answer every day.
Don't hear that one a lot.
But what I've watched, and I keep careful notes of his predictions, and when I was working with him closely, he had made 24 outrageous predictions like that. And at that point, 21 of them had been realized. And the other 3 are in the process of being realized now. And one of them was to complete this unified field theory. And I don't know if you know, but just a few days ago, like 3 or 4 days ago, he posted an abstract on the internet of his new paper, which actually apparently completes Einstein's unified and corrects Einstein's unified field theory. And the whole paper should be up within a month.
Wow. Wow.
One thing I'll add about Nassim is that it's so valuable to have somebody be able to unpack the science, because, you know, one of our issues in making Thrive 2 was, you know, there's a lot going on in the world, and I thought, how do we get people's attention to consider a whole new scientific paradigm, to see how relevant it actually is to our daily lives. And science determines a lot about what we experience as is even possible, right? If you think we're in a finite entropic universe, then things like scarcity make sense, because there's only a finite amount. When you understand we're actually part of this infinitely alive universe, then a new paradigm for our relating to each other emerges from that also. So for him to be able to take the time to articulate a whole new scientific paradigm has such far-reaching ramifications for everything, not just energy technologies, but for our understanding of who we are. So that's why we, so I was thinking, okay, so how do we tell this to make it relevant? And I thought, well, first show the possibility of a spaceship coming from understanding this, and that might help people want to stick with us while we unpack the science behind it. And I think Nassim did a fabulous job of that, and does a fabulous job.
He's when you said correcting Einstein, I mean, that's just brilliant. Imagine correcting Einstein. You've obviously been to where Nassim works, and in the movie we see a lot of that in Thrive 2. We see his laboratory and the people he works with. Can you, in the simplest form you possibly can, tell me what is the device he's working on? What is he actually doing down there in that lab? What's going on?
Well, he's doing a number of different things, but the major thing is what he calls the resonator. And Thrive 2 was the first time that he has shown this publicly. I really appreciated him doing that. And the main purpose of the resonator is to go into harmonious connection with the entire field itself. So the entire design, from the crystals in the center to the double torus to the frequencies at which the magnetic field is rotated electronically around that torus, all of that is designed to mimic how nature itself is working, how energy is moving. And the goal of doing that is ultimately to be able to tap nature's energy by creating a little mini black hole in that spherical crystal in the center, and then to be able to take that crystal out and use it to power a house or a community or a car or something like that. And then you put another, inert gas-filled crystal into the center, close it up, spin it up, and charge it again, and pull the next one out. So you literally would be getting these ongoing energy packets from the universe to then run our various systems in a way that's totally clean, not only clean and inexpensive, but healthy. He's put these crystals, in fact, I've done some of these studies with him in the presence of plants, and it will heal plants. Plants will grow much faster. Cut flowers will last much longer. So fundamentally, he's looking to create a harmonic link with the structure of the universe so that we can access its energy, its healing, and its consciousness.
Wow, it's incredible work that he's doing. It really is. And it's great that you've been championing him and you're so well connected to him and you're actually friends. Brilliant. So I want to talk about the first movie, just to set the stage slightly. It came out, did it come out in 2012? Am I right when I say that? That was
11/11/11.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, wow. They're my favorite numbers. 11/11.
By the way, just one quick thing before we move on. I notice on your roster of attendees here that there's a guy named Randy Langell, who's been a longtime friend of ours and also is a good friend of Nassim's, and we all traveled to Egypt together and so forth. So Randy, it's good to see you on there.
Brilliant. And just a good opportunity. People are joining late there. Just to say, folks, I will chat to Kimberly and Foster for about another 40 minutes, and then you guys come in for a Q&A. So have your questions formulating there as you listen to the conversation. Anything you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. Hey Randy, how you doing? So number one, Thrive 1, 11/11/11. What was the most amazing thing that came out of making that movie? What did you see that really changed, that really manifested into reality from that movie, that made you guys keep going, and now here you are bringing out a second movie? What was the biggest thing from Thrive where you went, wow, we've really achieved something here?
I would say two things. Personally, what happened was, so Thrive has over 90 million documented views, and it's in 27 languages, and it just spread like crazy. We never had any advertising. It just met a need, and so it spread. So we got exposed to lots of people, and that was thrilling and is what ultimately led us to make Thrive 2, which we can talk about. But in terms of what personally really changed for me, in that process, there was a lot of slander and things that were said about us that weren't true, and some negative stuff. And in that process, I got liberated. I found out, like, I had been trying my whole life, I guess, on some level to please people. And when it turned out that by speaking a truth that really was intended 100% to be helpful, to have that happen, I realized it's not that big of a deal. It's actually more important to respect myself and to come from that place, and a fearlessness emerged in me. And I remember right when it happened, we were traveling, and we were actually visiting a lab, a really far out good lab with some new energy technology, and had met somebody who was an ET contactee. And then this article came out. We were driving, slandering us for talking about these irresponsible things. And I was just in this reality warp, It was like, whoa, there are so many different realities. And we went out to lunch, and I just started cracking up. I just felt like it just burst out of me. We couldn't even order, because when I laughed, then Foster started laughing. He didn't even know why, but it was just like a total laugh attack.
The waitress comes over and asks Kimberly, "Are you okay?"
I was just like, oh my God, I just got it. I felt liberated to be true to myself at a level that I have found to be marvelous, and also just, hugely empowering and necessary to do something like make Thrive 2. So I would say, just personally, that's what happened for me the most out of from Thrive 1. And then strategically, or sort of in our lives, I think what happened is the fact that it spread so widely and we got exposed to so many people showed me that if you tell your truth with integrity, with intention to empower, and you meet a need, it will spread. That's it. You don't need all the fancy highfalutin things. You got to do this, and it has to be on that day at this time, and all the rest. It's like, give people something true that they need, and it will spread. And so that helped just kind of relax to stay true to my purpose and to what we decided to do.
And for me, it was very practical and very surprising. The main thing that I got was not only confirmation, but augmentation of my notion that the vast majority of humanity is totally awesome, despite what you read in the papers and see on TV. And that the two specific examples of that was one, we got contacted very quickly by over 1,000 inventors from all over the world saying, thank you for having the courage to talk about this stuff. I've already been suppressed, or I'm afraid I might, but here's what I've got going, you know, and that is just so encouraging to see what, and those are just the ones that reached out. It's like this hologram everywhere on the planet. And the other hologram that's fractalizing on the planet is wherever we would go, we did hundreds of appearances, and wherever we would go, someone would come up to us and say, hey, we've created a Thrive Solutions group in our town here, and we'd love to show you what we're working on. And we finally realized, wow, that they're self-creating, they're using the principles and information of Thrive and then taking it even beyond what we could imagine. So we created a solutions hub on our website where they could see each other and then upload petitions or lawsuits or scientific principles or fundraising techniques, whatever it was. So they didn't have to all recreate the wheel. And there's now over 1,100 of those in approximately 90 countries around the world, working on literally hundreds of issues. And we don't need to fund, micromanage, any of that type of thing. That when you give humans enough of the truth such that the situation seems coherent, they will take creative action beyond anything we could ever organize or even hope for.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah, did you want to add something, Kimberly?
There is a new artifact, I'll just say, that we're creating. Yeah, because that has evolved now, and we're just in the midst of finishing and really excited to launch, hopefully by the end of the month or soon, what we're calling the Solutions Hub. And it's a free open source web app that takes this solutions model and allows people to organize by issue or by region in 40 different languages. So whatever it is that you're most passionate about, and now the whole world is experiencing quite a bit in common. And so if there are strategies or tactics or things that you're finding in your work in the particular area that you're focused on, you can upload those for other people all over the world then to translate into their language and benefit from. And it was motivated. There's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. that says something like, those who love peace must learn to be as organized as those who love war. And toward that end, we're providing this sort of organizing tool that we'll be launching. So it's the next iteration of the Solutions Hub, and it was born out of the fact that we could just see that it's just tools that people need because they're already fabulous and doing wonderful things all over the world. We just need not to be reinventing the wheel wherever we go.
There's a great quote as well from Buckminster Fuller. You know that guy where he says, don't try and change the existing reality, just create a new one, you know, just declare the old one kind of obsolete. And I love the empowerment of that. You know, we're looking right now in the world at a lot of chaos, a lot of craziness going on. And it's almost like you like to say to yourself as a spiritual being, how much attention should I give that? And the answer is kind of nothing, you know. Now it's hard, very difficult to do that, but it's the whole ethos of turn the other cheek. It's the ability to focus on what you want to create in the midst of the eye of the storm, you know. And that takes me right into the health. The health in Thrive 2 was so well covered, so fascinating. I mean, I'm up to speed with a lot of that stuff, but you had some really new cutting edge stuff there. And I want to ask you, Kimberly, because you kind of covered that section of the movie. And I'm sure you've gone on to maybe there's been more things that have come out since the movie. what is really exciting you about health right now? It covered things like light and sound. I mean, there was even one sequence where you recorded your voice and then you listened to it on headphones, and the pH miracle. Can you give us a few, Kimberly, of your top health tips, and what are you incorporating into your own life? I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, it was very exciting. Well, I think most exciting is the overarching understanding that we have the ability to recognize what's going on in our bodies way sooner than once it's manifest as an illness. That self-knowing and physically as well as spiritually and emotionally and mentally can happen by understanding the energetic nature of our bodies and then tuning into what are the frequencies and specifically what's the harmony, what's the song that the different cells are singing, and are they in harmony with each other? That's actually like scientifically what it comes down to. So the thing with the headphones was that there were, and this is out there, products out there that Healy's one of them I know, where you can, the vagus nerve, most of our organs interact with the vagus nerve, which then comes out and it's in our voice. The accumulation of those different frequencies are heard in our voice. And in fact, in acupuncture in the old days, listening to your voice was part of how diagnosis was done. So you can now, it's fed in with all these complex algorithms and stuff that computers can help with to be able to determine where there might be something out of balance or in need of support or in need of tuning for us to be in more complete harmonic resonance within ourselves and with our environment. So you record your voice, you get a diagnosis, and then you can actually feed back frequencies through a headset that can help restore those balances. And the notion of being able to get at something, soon enough when it's just starting to be off, instead of waiting until you're sick, is hugely empowering. And I'm just for empowering individuals with access to clean energy and decentralized communities, access to ways to prevent any illness, and then of course ways to cure illness if we've already got it. And so the pH thing that you talk about that I learned about in the course of making the movie and hadn't known about was the importance of alkalinity in our bodies. And the gist of it is that, I mean, it makes sense because we're mostly electrical. There's a lot of electrical communication going on, and salt is an electrical conductor. And there's a huge amount of fluid in our body, the interstitial fluid, that actually determines the environment that all of our cells and tissues and organs are living in. And so when we keep that at a proper pH, that which you can test with your saliva or your urine, turns out you can really heal every, late stage metastasized cancer. And in addition, you can prevent the cancer from developing, in my opinion, and I've seen it. I studied the records of 320 patients, well, not patients, 320 people who utilized this very simple salt mineral diet and with supplements and were able to heal. So I'm excited because, of course, it empowers us to get out from under this pharmaceutical stranglehold and to think that we need to harm our bodies in order to heal them. That's not my experience. And as far as what I've incorporated, I have a fabulous, I'm fortunate I get to grow food in my veggie garden. Every morning I juice it into a great smoothie, and I take the salt mineral products, which we'll be linking to at thriveon.com when we launch a portal that we're doing that's just sort of products we love or things that we found that we recommend. So as soon as we can get to that, we will. But I'll add that, of course, most of the technologies that we found in Highlight have been slandered and marginalized, if not all the way censored, because that happens when, so far, it happens when, big industries and corporations running the pharmaceuticals are challenged. And so part of what's necessary is, I think, to think as if nobody's watching, right? Like, just don't, just free from any concern about, oh, if I check this out, what about, just look into it. Think next, who might not want you to see this, and what are they saying, and does it actually make sense? And I have found that having an alkaline diet and using these salt minerals really helped, and that frequencies and vibrations can really heal.
I love what you said there about recently, actually before this interview, somebody asked me to ask you a very tricky question, and you were asked it before. And I've heard you being asked this question and answer it in my book brilliantly, but anyway, this question. And I said to the guy, you know what, I'm not going to get into that discussion with you. Here's what I'm going to say to you. Feel into your heart. If it resonates with you, go watch the movie. If it doesn't, end of discussion. I'm not going to discuss it. I haven't got the energy, And right now we're seeing this foster this information overload. People are absolutely going every which way but loose, And it's like, I wanted to ask you, with what's happening in the world right now, what advice do you give to people to tune into what's right for them? After making the two movies, what's the most empowering thing humans can do right now, do you feel, on the planet to move towards these solutions that you guys are presenting?
Wow, what a powerful question. For me, it's first to find the stillness within yourself, and then to ask yourself a question that oftentimes people spend a lifetime not asking, which is, what's my purpose? What am I doing here? And the purpose is not, to make $1 million or to get to Ireland or something like that. Those are goals. No, those are important to have, but a purpose is a direction. It's like north on your compass. And it really tells you what you're drawn to be fulfilling. And so if you find your purpose, which usually has both a discovery and a sharing with the world, or a teaching or a healing aspect to it, then we encourage people, ask yourself, which sector would you most like to work on in alignment with your purpose? Is it media? Is it science? Is it relationship? Is it economics? Is it education, health, etc.? We work with a model of 13 sectors which cover all of human endeavor. So if you pick what you're most drawn to and oftentimes most skilled with, then ask yourself, which issue do you want to work on? And then once you see the issue, ask yourself, which level of engagement? Do you want to work on meeting immediate needs, like working in a food kitchen or a doctor in Africa or something like that? Or do you want to work on systemic change to improve the conditions that would better meet immediate needs? Or the third and final one is working on the consciousness shift, which is actually fine-tuning our worldview to align with the way the world actually is. Because the clearer your worldview is, the better your systems are, the more needs are met. And if somebody knows that much about themselves, then they can start a group, they can join a group, either locally or on our Solutions Hub. They'll be able to find groups worldwide working on what they want to do. And you're bringing so much to that group in terms of knowing yourself and your skills and your ability to collaborate and so forth. So I don't have a whole lot of patience for people spending a lot of time saying, well, what could one person do? There's nothing else that's doing anything except individual people. And once you ask yourself the important questions, then you can have what it takes to actually go out there and join with others and transform the whole thing. And that's what it's going to take. People ask me to predict, are we going to make it? And what's going to happen in the election? I have no idea. But the one thing I know for sure is it's up to each one of us.
Sure. Such a good answer. Thank you.
I would like, you said one thing there, which is, I think that when we tune in on that level and do know our purpose, it allows the greater integration that I was talking about in the very beginning. So one thing I think is the thinking feeling dichotomy, where we can get into our hearts and feel the union and it feels so good, and then we turn off this gathering and go somewhere and experience the division and the overload of information, and how to have those two, not like where the information doesn't throw us off from the center that we found. And to me, purposeful self-knowing and action that's in alignment with it, then the information becomes fuel. It's like, okay, let me understand this so that I can align my actions to be most fitting to the challenge at hand, because we can't turn off from information. We need to know what's going on in order to have our actions actually impact those things. And not all actions are equal in these days. So I think the information is important, but it needs to flow through us. And I've never seen that work unless we're on purpose.
Sure. There's a lot of, in the New Age community, and I kind of paraphrased that when I said I would give zero attention. But somebody reminded me recently that, Paul, you're in a consensus reality. You know, you came here to get your hands dirty. You want to get stuck into this consensus reality. So, Foster, I loved in the movie when you went to meet the inventor. I don't want to give away too many spoilers here, but that was brilliantly done, because we watched you almost in real time go through this process where the guy wasn't texting you, wasn't calling you back. And yeah, what was going on there, and what's come out of the movie from that? Is that the real deal, do you feel, what this man has created?
Yeah, I do. And that's one of the reasons why we made the movie, is that I've been looking for 20 years for the real deal when it comes to devices which put out more energy than goes in, or ideally the ones I've been focused on are the ones that aren't plugged into anything, any traditional sources. So there's no question that if they're running houses or warehouses or cars or whatever for days and weeks and months on end, there's no question that they're tapping a different type of energy. They're tapping the energy of the field itself in one way or another. So yeah, going to visit him was fantastic, and it was excruciating. For those of you who haven't seen the film yet, he tried my patience to the ultimate degree, because he would get very enthusiastic and trusting and everything, and then he would just sort of snap back and get really afraid and suspicious. And understandably so. You know, this was a kid whose dad left at a very young age, so he was suspicious of men. And then he had investors not treat him well. He had been thrown in jail by his own government and tortured to try to get the information out of him about how it works. And then they let him out, and then somebody poisoned him. And so, you know, he's not someone who has an unquestioning trust for human beings. On the other hand, he has an unquestioning trust of the field. He would call it God. He was raised in an evangelical Christian community there. And from the time he was a toddler, he just took to it like a fish to water. And he would, as a kid, he would pray hours a day, and oftentimes fast for days at a time. Now that's kind of convenient when you're living in Zimbabwe, because he didn't have a whole lot to eat anyway. But the important part of this is that when he was 14 years old, his prayers started getting answered, and he started getting full-blown concepts delivered to him. Wow. In answer to his prayers. And he had no idea of electronics, but he was being taught by some source how to understand electronics. And once this had happened a few times, he all of a sudden realized, oh, you know, I think I understand electronics now. This guy, I think he probably dropped out in 7th grade in school or whatever. So this was all non-traditional sources. And so once he understood that, then he thought, okay, that's interesting. In his next prayer session, he starts downloading schematics, where literally he would pick up a pen and draw on a piece of paper what these drawings were, and then he'd give them to a friend who did know about wiring circuit boards, and the guy would build it, and they would work. And so what happened was he became very adept with radio frequencies. That's what really his gift. And he's like a musician, but his instrument is the cosmos. And So he built an independent, unique radio transmitter in his backyard, started a little radio station and started broadcasting. So of course, within a day or two, the government knocked on his door and said, no, you're not allowed to do that. He says, okay, well, what can I do with this knowledge that God gave to me? And in one of his next prayer sessions, he was in a vision where he was in a rural medical clinic in Africa, and people were dying for lack of refrigeration of their medicines. So he comes out of his prayer and goes, oh, that's something I could figure out with the radio frequency. So he spent a couple of years working on these different things, and finally had a device that would run just on radio frequencies. And that was the beginning of the devices that we show in the film. And it's hard even to put words to what it was like to stand next to that device with no sounds except some little cooling fans over the toroidal coils. And it's not plugged into anything. And it's putting out 0.5 megawatt of energy, enough to power 300 homes in Africa. And it's just like, okay, well, I took a solid, experienced engineer who had been vetting these things for years, never found anything that works. And he was blown away. For those of you who have seen the film, even if you haven't, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert, but I think you'll find it actually makes it even more enjoyable. That once the vetter signed off on this thing and said, yeah, this is the real deal. We interviewed him the next morning in his hotel room, and he was still somewhat in a daze. He said, I'm still processing this. The long and short of it is that I think I've just witnessed the end of fossil fuels.
I mean, what would that mean for the world, if that
Exactly.
gets rolled out? And you guys are you're following through with this man, are you? You're going to bring him, has he been to visit you guys, or is he going to do,
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
He's been here with some of his colleagues. And yes, we're following through with him and a number of other inventors. And investors are stepping forward, and engineers, of course, want to work with these people. And it goes hand in hand with Nassim's unified field paper, because most of these guys have no idea of any formal training behind how this could work. Nassim doesn't have the formal training either, but he's taken his intuition, his experimentation, and then learned the scientific language where he's now explaining it to physicists all over the world, how of course the universe is full of energy, and if we can just tap it harmoniously rather than violently, it'll give us what we need.
And I think the thing about, what happened for us is we were in Egypt and Thailand and China and Mexico and Costa Rica, all through Europe, all through the US. Like, it's not like it's in one place. On every continent, people are finding basically the same way to align with some infinite source of energy. And it's either used for expanding consciousness, which is what the shaman are doing. Same conversation about aligning ourselves still in stillness to become a portal to something. What is that something? It's the same thing the health people were talking about, same thing the energy. And sometimes it's radio frequency, sometimes it's another form. But part of our intention with Thrive 2 was to give the science to stop this from seeming like some one quack here in Africa. It's like, that's not true. This is one individual in Africa, and there are individuals here and here and here and here, and they're all operating with the same principles. And Nassim's work is to help us understand what those principles are. And I'll add that in terms of our solutions model, no one has all that it takes. Like Maxwell found the way to actually create the machine, but he couldn't articulate the science the way Nassim could. And then we were able to put together the team who could illustrate. You'll notice Thrive 2 offers unprecedentedly beautiful and accurate visuals of what our understanding of the field is in terms of how it looks and how do we interact with it and what are the scientific principles. So all that, like, there's a part for each of us, right? And nobody does it all, but when we're together and we're coordinated, that's when the power happens.
I loved when Maxwell said to you, I think he said to you, Foster, I think it's God's frequency, or it could be an alien frequency, he said, but I'm tapping into a radio wave and it's giving the device this power. And it's so you get the hair standing up on your arms, you know, you're like, wow. But that leads me into the whole ET thing, which didn't come up as much in part 2 as it did in part 1. Probably because there's been maybe a bit, you were saying earlier on before we started that there's a lot more coming out around that now. How do you feel about disclosure? And I mean, my only excitement around the ET thing, because I do find it can be a bit of a distraction, is that we have some big brothers and big sisters who've been through this before, and let's tap into what they know. Let's tap into their wisdom. And that came true to me in Thrive 1. Just wondering why it didn't feature as much in the second one, just didn't follow along, or what happened there?
Yeah, there have been a tremendous number of exciting developments in that field, and we've continued to follow them, but it just didn't make it into the movie. You know, we tried to squeeze about 200 hours worth of footage down into 2.5 hours in the movie, and we just cited that one aspect that the Vatican and New York Times, CNN are all acknowledging the presence of at least UFOs now. And I personally believe that that's an intentional government coordinated disclosure where they realize that so many people are catching on to it now and having the experiences in every country around the planet, that they better get ahead of it and make sure that they control the pace of disclosure. So I think that's what's going on with that. I think what they're talking about is real, but there's so much more going on than you're hearing through any of the mainstream outlets. I know Frank Drake and the SETI project, you know, has their big antennas and so forth. And here we are 30 years later, and they're still saying, nope, don't hear anything. And meanwhile, there's thousands of contacts on a daily basis. There's signals sent through the crop circles, and the evidence just goes on and on. You know, we had a few people in Thrive 1, this one guy, Clifford Stone, who had been on a military base as an officer when he witnessed this ship. They were doing a drill where they turned on all of the nuclear missile silos. And this ship comes down over the base and flies along the row of silos and turns every single one of them off. So, and this is a military guy coming forward, risking his reputation to tell this stuff to the public. So I think that we're in a situation where we're being visited by multiple species. I think at least 50 from my most reputable sources. Most of it's going on telepathically or in the skies above us. There's some of them are battling with each other over, you know, how to treat us. But the bottom line is that they seem to be, there's some at least that are really helping us. And it's clear that they can't do it for us. I think there is some kind of pride and directive amongst advanced species, just like the same way if you had your child on a jungle gym at a playground, you wouldn't just put a little toddler on the top because they haven't figured out how to get up there and how to get back down again. So I think that they're trying to keep us safe, which is no small task, until we actually figure out how to get along with each other and how to have harmonious technology.
Sure.
The significance, I think, also in the disclosure just is to recognize that we know they're not using fossil fuels to get here. And so what are they using? And that opens our minds to the possibility of different kinds of energy, which of course we're saying exists and are here available to us, and that's how we believe it's happening. So it fits nicely, and that was one of the main reasons to bring it up last time. And as you know, director and editor and all kinds of stuff, I'm not the main editor, but that's my role with Foster's research, you know.
I gather she prunes.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, what's the minimum sufficient here to tell the coherent story, and how do we tell it? And that's just
Sure.
how much got in here. We wouldn't not have something, but it just didn't have as much.
Let me say one more thing on this topic, because I think it's really important. You know, we talked a little bit in the consciousness section of Thrive 2 about this phenomenon of downloads. Virtually everyone we interviewed for Thrive 1 and Thrive 2, I would say at least 90%, acknowledge their guidance through downloads. So sooner or later, we got to ask ourselves, okay, what's downloading, and how do we access that? And the with the story about Maxwell, he's got his name for that particular thing, but he was asking a question of the universe, and the universe fed him back what he needed in that regard. And that's what I think is possible for absolutely every one of us now. So if we each engage in that a little bit each day to really create that still point in ourselves, ask the question that is burning in you, that you're willing to devote your life to, and fasten your seatbelt.
I mean, I've heard in many circles that the Schumann resonance at the moment is very active. The light quotient on the planet is really ramping up. I'll just touch on the UFO. I mean, just a couple things that struck me. Did you check out Bob Lazar, Foster? His story was quite amazing, wasn't it?
Sure.
Along with the guy you mentioned, Clifford Stone. And there's been a few kind of amazing stories. The guy as well who lived on the base with the tall whites in Roswell. That was a fascinating one.
One of the guys we interviewed for Thrive One, James Gilliland, he acknowledged to us at one point, as he was describing these beings that had invited him numerous times onto the ship, he finally started telling us about he had an ongoing romantic relationship with a feline. I'm like, okay, now my mind is getting stretched, and that takes a lot. But he also described it to another person, a woman that we were interviewing, who had not talked previously publicly about her contact. And she began to trust us and told us about these cat-like beings that she had been relating to. And so that's one reason why we got her together with him. And he had a drawing. He had a police forensic artist draw this cat woman that he was in relationship with. So we went up to his hotel room where he opened his computer and showed a picture of this feline feminine being. And this woman is Native American. She just started to weep. Tears just came down her cheeks. And she said, "Oh my God, I didn't know anyone else knew. That's exactly the species that I've been in relationship with myself."
Wow.
So we live in interesting times, that's for sure.
That's so for sure. I mean, I meet some wacky people, but you two, you take you take the biscuit. But that's wacky is what we want, isn't it? I just love wacky. You know, let's stretch and broaden our horizons. You know, it's like this feeling of openness always comes up in me. You know, when I talk about these things. You know, it's just it's just the way to be. We're going to go to questions fairly soon. Before we do, I just want to. I'm going to come right back down to reality right now, because it's just something that it's doing the rounds at the moment about Mr. Trump. Now, I don't like to bring him in that sense, but it's more a kind of the election is coming up. There's a lot of stuff happening in the US. The US is kind of like it's like the stage for the rest of the world to play out on in some way. We do look to America at times to see what's going on over there. There's a thing called QAnon doing the rounds you probably know about. And some people are saying, you know, Mr. Trump is he's doing a great job here. He's standing up for everybody. He's the kind of savior. And I'm looking at all of this information, and perfectly people who are in the New Age circle are saying this and they're quite convinced of it. Some people aren't buying it at all. I do think he is a great disturber of what's going on right now. But what's your view on his what's going on in the White House right now? Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of course, I'll say my part on it is that what the whole thing has brought up for me is that one of the same way we in Thrive 2, the unified field, we always say it stars the unified field, right? That's the source of everything that we then unpack. And one of the principles that emerges has to do with how we get along with each other. Because what's really playing out, as I see it, is sort of the ultimate separation, divide, and conquer thing. Like, no matter who wins, you've got 49% of people really dissatisfied. And that is a dangerous and unsustainable solution. So the notion that there's one party that's the savior that should trump the other, coerce the other into going along with the ways, isn't a long-term solution. So here we are in a situation where my personal orientation is toward local solutions, because I think that's where we have the power. I mean, I'm in California, it wouldn't matter who I vote for, right? With the electoral politics, that it's so fundamentally corrupt in that way that impacting our local community seems to me to be where we can really have our power. Foster has more opinions about Trump and Biden and how it all plays out, and we have our differences in it, but which is a fun part of our dynamic, is that we're two thoughtful people here, you know, figuring it out. But I will say that to me, in terms of a long-term solution, what most excites me is that we found one principle that every single person on the planet agrees to, at least for themselves, which is a big deal when you think about billions of people. And that principle is that nobody wants to be violated against their will. And when you extrapolate that to our social organizing and our politics and all that kind of stuff, you're led with that government itself is fundamentally built on violating people against their will, because it's based on taking your money to do something, whether you support that or not. So we're so far down that road that the notion that we're going to somehow snap our fingers and abide by this principle and get there, we go through various transition things that we think are really important: ending corporate personhood, getting legal rights for ecosystems. Those are actions that we advocate for and believe they're trans-political, and they're really critical, and they will help us get into the playing field where we can come up with real solutions. But in terms of a political solution, I think working in that trans-political way and taking actions that don't involve relying on coercion for a so-called solution, because I don't think anyone in this election is going to concede, no matter who wins. I think we've got a big mess on our hands, and the notion that one is going to, that we're not going to end up having to come up with something better than this has reached its endpoint. So I'm a local politics gal.
And Foster, just because the movie does cover this a bit, the non-aggression principle, I'm just wondering, from your perspective, is we keep investing this energy in different leaders and it's just not panning out. So is it time for us to become sovereign, to become empowered ourselves? And within that framework, how would politics look? How would politics look in going forward with the solutions you present? How do you feel it would look?
Well, to put it really bluntly, after my lifetime of research, I believe if as humanity, we don't get rid of the notion of anybody ruling over anyone else, which is what politics is. If we don't get rid of the notion of government, we will not survive, because it is the cancer that has eaten away at every single country since the beginning of the notion of the nation state. You know, it has been better than dictators or, you know, cavemen just clubbing you over the head and taking your food or something like that. There's been progress, as Martin Luther King says, the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. But we're not there yet. And what we're missing, this is really what the end of the whole end of the film is about, is I believe that what we're missing is honoring the individual sovereignty of every single person. So I don't vote. I can't imagine myself ever voting. That would be like voting for which slave master was going to whip me or take my food the next day. It's that bizarre once you really understand it. And at the same time, I recognize that most of the people on the planet still do. They beg to vote. They fight to get the vote. So we're still in a condition of dealing with governments. And that being said, since you went there, will say that I think the Trump thing is vastly, vastly misunderstood in the United States and across the world. I find him a somewhat embarrassing person to defend because of just his macho, crass tone with most things. But at the same time, what he's doing, I think, is very courageous and really important because, and that's not going to make any sense to people unless they understand that there is an agenda for global domination that has been around at least for 200 years, very actively and highly organized. And in my experience, and from very direct high-level connections, Trump is the first president of the United States to be not a part of that globalist cabal since Andrew Jackson. And that's why he has Andrew Jackson's portrait as the only picture in the Oval Office, because Andrew Jackson spent his administration fighting the central bankers and survived an assassination attempt. And now Trump is trying to do the same thing. And I believe that he is actually trying to drain the swamp. And the swamp is not just a few bad actors. It actually means the deep state, which is the Illuminati, which is the globalist cabal, whatever you want to call them. And there's one quote that I'll say that I was really thrilled to get to say to the world in Thrive 2, which is that the core struggle for a thriving civilization is not between nations or political parties or genders or races or classes, even though that's what it looks like in all the headlines, because that's what they want us to be fighting each other. The real battle is between those who want to be free and those who would continue to steal our freedom from us. So when we're in the US, when we're dealing with all of a sudden the economic collapse and riots, race riots in the street, and I think a lot of misinformation about what this so-called virus really is, it's a huge and effective distraction from the fact that the central bank has just printed $7 trillion and given it to the international bankers and the multinational corporations and the Illuminati themselves. And they're taking that from us, from our kids, from our grandkids, and nobody's even talking about it. We go on, but I think that's enough for now.
That's a lot of money, 7 trillion.
I just want to add one thing there. Well, one, I vote, but two is that what I was talking about earlier about information and feeling, understanding that this agenda to have a global corporate rule at the expense of any sovereignty, individual sovereignty, local community sovereignty, even national sovereignty. We have really unpacked that. That was the point of Thrive 1, really, in a lot of ways, was to say, if you look through that lens, things look different. So somebody who's doing all this nationalist stuff, right, to try to protect America, suddenly you see in a different light in relation to a global corporate takeover. So I think that's the lens, and that's where feelings and thoughts and all that, it helps us to have that information, not to be like, oh my God, now what? It's like, all right, that helps. Now I can see a way to get at this. And that's why we would recommend ending corporate personhood, for example. And we unpack that some in Thrive 2 and on our website and elsewhere. But I just think the point is there are things to do then when you understand that.
I just want to add that the last time I was in Ireland, which was quite a while ago, I had to go through a checkpoint to go from the south to the north, that with 17-year-olds in uniform with AK-47s. And so the entire country had been convinced to fight each other, and the excuse was religion that time. Other times it's race, other times it's national borders or something like that. But all of that is nonsense that has been used for centuries by the people who want to have us fighting with each other until they actually get control of the whole thing. All the banks, everybody's body, the medical system, the media systems, and all it. And they're very close, and they're using the cover of COVID to try to get it across the goal line. So it's the most urgent time in human history for us to wake up and get rid of that agenda, because this is global for the first time. It used to be that people could flee from Soviet Union, from Vietnam, from Russia and so forth to places like the United States or Ireland or Canada or something like that. If they succeed with what they're trying to do now, there will be no place to run, no place to hide.
Okay, on that positive note.
So that's why we made a movie about solutions, because there are
You
ways
totally
out of
did.
this.
You
Yes.
totally did. We have the solutions. We have the solutions.
Yeah, they're not going to win because they've got to go up against the whole field itself and the life force and love and truth and 98% of the people on the planet. So we will win this. I just hope we can win it as an info war so we don't have to fight a physical war.
Yeah, I love when you say that we're, you know, in a sense, we're working with the tide, we're working with the unified field, and they're trying to go against that. You know, that's a tricky, I would rather be on our side, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to lie about everything. They have to hide everything. They have to force people to do things. And what's emerging is just the opposite. It's transparent, it's voluntary, and it goes with the life force. So it's actually great news. I'm ridiculously optimistic despite what I know.
Ridiculously optimistic. Brilliant. Okay, we changed the note. Let's go to people now for questions and see where we have. Let's get the audience involved here. Okay, so Michelle is right in there with a question. She wants to know Bitcoin, Ethereum, cryptocurrencies, tokenization, and blockchain, the right tools for a decentralized world. Who would like to take that one?
You can do that.
Okay, I'm a big fan of cryptocurrency, not solely and not run by the government, nor monopolized by anyone. But I think that cryptocurrency is a big step in the direction of bypassing the central banks, if we can keep it free, keep it out of their hands, and having an honest track record. What the blockchain allows you to do is actually have honest financial transactions. What a radical notion. And at the same time, when people ask me a lot, if there's a huge financial collapse coming beyond even what's happening so far, what do you recommend? And I recommend, to whatever degree you can, besides preparing yourself, your family, your community physically, to, if you have any extra assets, to get them in precious metals, get them in cryptocurrencies, get them in land that you can live on and grow on, and investing in the best projects that you can find that will actually transform the situation. So I think crypto can play a big role.
Okay. Okay. Keep rolling your questions in there, folks.
One thing about the blockchain that's been really interesting, not just for the currencies, but it's provided an interesting way to deal with the situation between inventors and investors, where inventors have the knowledge. Sometimes they don't want to give up that knowledge, but investors don't want to invest in them unless it's outside of them. And the blockchain has provided an option as a way to keep the intellectual property safe out of the inventor, but not known to others.
A lot of people try to claim that, the money is the root of all evil. And I think that's a really dangerous misunderstanding. The problem is dishonest money or monopolized money. We need some sort of currencies in our current state. We can't just all manifest whatever we want with our consciousness. So meanwhile, we need a currency of exchange. So if I have a cow and I need a computer, I don't have to find some guy who's willing to take my cow. It's just not efficient. But we just need the medium of exchange to be honest and transparent, and crypto serves that quite well so far.
Very quick question there from Randy, your buddy. Randy, there will be a replay to the Zoom call. Yes, we have this recorded, and we'll be putting it up on YouTube and many other places as well.
For any of those of you who, if you don't know Randy already, this guy is a true Renaissance man, a brilliant scientist in many different fields, who has got one of the most open minds that I've come across for someone with as much traditional training in science as he's had. So I recommend you pick his mind whenever you can.
Take a bow there, Randy. We might be interviewing you next week.
Yeah.
So KD is asking, what were the 3 aspects to ask once you have selected a sector? So this was earlier on, Foster, in our conversation. The third you mentioned was the consciousness shift. What he missed the first two. Katie
Yeah.
missed the first two. Can you
And
remind
this for everyone, this is on our website at thriveon.com in what's called the Solutions Toolkit. We lay out that whole process that I summarized. And the three levels, once you choose your sector and your issue, the three levels are immediate needs, systemic change, or consciousness shift.
And those can change. And so if you go to the Solutions Hub, it's in the navigation bar, and under it is the Solutions Model. That's where you'll find it. And it's just a really effective way to see where you fit, because we may all be concerned about, I won't get into it more than this. Let's say we're all concerned about some aspect of COVID. You'll find out that people are actually concerned about it from different perspectives. Health, justice, there's different ways of engaging. And some people want to do something on an immediate needs level. Some people want to understand it at a systems level. And so it's important to know that and to find your place in that, because then you can see all the rest that's happening at the same time. So the solutions model is really a useful way to gain access to tools to understand your own part, and then to see how it fits in a broader whole.
We have a question here from Calvin Keats. Can we create a new independent flow of information, independent and free of monitored communications? So we're on to censorship here. Yeah, can we create our own portal?
Well, Calvin, that is the question of the day. And fortunately, there's so much good news emerging on that. In our film, we have one graphic where we show the logos of 13 different truth media sources that we highly respect. And in an article that's just about to come out in our newsletter in a few days, we cite 60 of them. Now, these are non-mainstream sources that we've found over the last 20 years. Everybody misses it sometimes. Everybody makes mistakes, but these are sources that we have come to trust, that do thorough research, bold research, where the point is to get to the truth, back it up with facts and evidence, rather than to support a particular political party or a particular nation state or something like that. So I highly recommend that if you're going on mainstream media, just do it to see what they want you to think, but then go to honest alternative media to get the information that is going to be closer to the truth, and then make up your own minds.
Yeah, and I think in that also to be discerning, like you said, to figure out what part of this seems true to me, and to accept that somebody might have a piece of it, but not all of it, and to not throw the whole thing out. I know that's true for us, is we've exposed ourselves to every imaginable perspective, and then glean what's of value here and what's of value here, and piece it together ourselves, disagree with each other, do all of that's the stuff of becoming a sovereign being. And being most effective is to think for ourselves, and it takes a lot of exposure to do that.
Yeah, you just sign up for newsletters of people that you respect. Oftentimes they're free. They seldom are very expensive if they do charge. And I probably review between 50 and 100 of those every day, and then print out the articles that I find to be most valuable and collect them by issue and that type of thing. But it can save you a tremendous amount of time just to have sources that you respect, and you can fly through the titles of the articles or podcasts and so forth quite quickly, and then choose what you really want to spend your time on.
Great. I've got a question here from Michael McKeever, who's down in Wicklow there. So Michael is asking, he's heard that the 5G towers around the US are being converted to Tesla towers. Have you heard about this?
Oh, well, that would be a dream come true, but I have no evidence of that. Michael, have you seen Thrive 2 yet?
He has, yeah, I think he has. Yeah.
Okay, good. There may be some confusion there, because we depict the Tesla tower that was built in Texas. We show that, and we talk about the company. And that, I believe, is going to be a really significant and viable substitute for 5G, because it can transmit wirelessly not only energy, but also communications at a healthy frequency instead of this super dangerous microwave frequency that 5G is using. So I would love to see all these Tesla tower, all these 5G antennas converted, but I don't think it's happening yet. I think it's still going the wrong direction so far.
Okay. Michelle has a good question here, and it'd be an interesting one. What's your opinion about Elon Musk and the project Neuralink? He is against vaccines, but he promotes transhumanism. Both solutions, vaccines and transhumanism, are a way to lose our power and become empty shells without souls. Yeah, Elon is a tricky character. What do we think of him? Okay.
I'll let Kimberly take that one. She's been looking into that a lot.
This is
Really?
Okay. My passion. Yeah. So I think this issue shows us how futile it is to think that we're going to all come to agreement. There are trillions of dollars and decades of research put into transhumanism. And those people are very committed to it. I read their books, I listen to their lectures, I've met with them. I really tried to understand what is the worldview that believes efficiency is greater than humanity as we experience it, or other things about it. So I think that this is the ethical dilemma of the times that we're in, where human augmentation, that's what Elon calls the Neuralink, right? You can plug your computer into your brain into a computer. You could learn 15 languages in 10 minutes. I mean, imagine. And then you could also get injectables that would enable your body to live longer, be stronger, heal faster, do all kinds of things. And we actually all live somewhere on the continuum in our values of human augmentation, right? If you break your arm, do you get a piece of metal put in it, or do you let the natural bone just heal? Well, most would choose under certain conditions to get the metal in because it's proven to be stronger and better. Do you do stem cells? Do you do whatever? And then we find some are here on that we would actually go for being transhumanist and alter the DNA of our humanness. And others say, no, I'm okay with life cycles. It's okay for me to age. It's okay to die. All that kind of stuff's all right for me. I just want to have a healthier life as I go. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that we will come to agreement. I don't even think we're going to come to agreement on what's an appropriate response for COVID. Some people really believe that a vaccine is the way to go, and some people really believe that it's not. And so this is where the non-aggression principle comes in. I think what's required is that we figure out, how do we coexist with these differences in a way that we're allowed the freedom of choice? And that is a big dilemma that we need to figure out, because you can't compete intellectually, you can't compete physically. This means there are huge ramifications in this, and they are unfolding. Like this, the Neuralink is the tip of the iceberg. These guys have been on this stuff with so much money for so long. And luckily, the injectable issue of vaccines is bringing it to the fore when you see there are real differences in opinion, and people will fight to uphold their belief about what's the right thing to do here. So the transhumanist interface with human biology is the dilemma through which the non-aggression principle, to me, can come to the fore most sort of palpably. Because if I were hoping for agreement to solve our problems, I would be hopeless. But when instead I hope for a way to abide by a principle that allows us to figure out where on this continuum we can manifest our beliefs and values without imposing them on one another, then I think we can do that. It's going to be hard. We got a big job ahead of us, but I do think humanity is capable of that. And that's why we spend so much time after showing we've got solutions to every single problem on the planet, but we don't yet have a way to manifest them. We don't have a way to get along with each other enough and have enough freedom to bring them to the fore. And that's the ultimate challenge. The technology exists. So now what? And I believe it's through the principles. And I think that it's possible to do that. And I think that's what we need to get on with.
Yeah, I think that's a beautifully said. And I do believe it's the most central discussion on the planet right now is voluntary choice, the non-aggression principle, which basically just states that no one is allowed to initiate force against anyone else except in true self-defense. So if we keep coming back to that, a question that I'm asking people a lot these days is, if there's a civil war, which side are you on? You know, in Ireland, you had to answer that for a long time. In France, in Germany, in Russia, in the United States. But I usually get a real silence because they're not exactly sure in the United States right now, well, which civil war are you talking about? Is it the race war? Is it the war against the 1%? Is it the war about mandatory vaccines?
Gender.
Is it gender? Yeah. And so for me, we were so excited when we found something so simple after all these decades of questing that human beings not only could align around. Every single human being we've ever met agrees so far that they don't want to be violated against their will. So imagine having human beings all agree on something. So maybe in the same way that we were missing the torus as the fundamental pattern of sustainability, maybe the fundamental principle for ethical philosophy, surviving and thriving as a species, is no one gets to initiate force against anyone else. It's as simple as that. And yet most of humanity is not even aware of the principle yet. That's why we look at each other and say, sometimes we're just too old for this, but that's why we're up late most nights trying to get this message out before it's too late, because it's worth it. We got a fantastic planet and a fantastic species if we can just wake up in time.
You know, it's funny when you asked that question there, which side are you on? There was a silence. You know, I know we're on a Zoom call, but I felt myself go silent. So I get the feeling you might have found humanity's still point there.
Yes, I like that. Well, let me expound on that for just a moment, because there's another dream of mine coming true next week, which is neither Kimberly or I think we'll probably ever make a feature film again. It's the one topic that's taboo in our house at this point. But I know that I will be involved in the media, wanting to speak with fellow human beings the rest of my, at least, non-senile life. As long as I can make any sense, this is the conversation that I want to be in. And next Saturday, a week from this weekend, I'm opening up what I'm calling the Freedom Portal on our website, thriveon.com. And what it is a multi-way communication opening where I can put out articles and podcasts and talks and so forth. And people can also interact with me or interact with us in question and answer sessions. I'll be having experts in at the cutting edge from different sectors, and also creating roundtables where we can discuss things amongst well-informed people who disagree, you know, and so people can listen and make up their minds for themselves. And these are exactly the kind of issues that we'll be taking through. No matter what the issue is, we'll be taking it through the rigorous lens of the non-aggression principle and the global domination agenda, because that's the utopia and oblivion. If the global domination agenda gets their way, we're in super trouble as a species. If, however, we wake up to the non-aggression principle, as Bucky Fuller also said, we've got this choice now between utopia and oblivion, and that will lead toward utopia beyond what we can imagine. So I invite people to check that out on our website. The first introduction to it next Saturday is free and open to anyone. And then if people are interested, they can subscribe. There's already thousands of people signed up to join that conversation. We'll share the best that we have to offer, but it's really, we want to learn from you as well.
And we will, I'll say that I'm really excited in the health, one of our health conversations, and that will include some proponents of transhumanism, at least this gathering of medical data, which I believe is following along the same way that our behavioral data was collected through Facebook and things like that, and then not used for our well-being. I think as we get into people gathering our medical data for our personalized care, which helps, right? Like it will help. If your DNA is there and they're making special stuff just for you, it will be physically better. It's just, what are the consequences? Who are we giving that information to? And how does that fit with the transhumanist agenda? And actually having those conversations with people all along the belief spectrum there, which is how we've most learned to be able to be with people with whom we disagree. So we want to help expose other people to those conversations and have you join in with them. So should be fun.
So if a UFO lands on your backyard and the door opens, I guess the point of this is make sure that it's a voluntary invitation rather than them abducting you. And if someone comes to your door with a hypodermic needle with a vaccine that you have to take, that's not a good sign. Make sure that anything you inject into your body is done voluntarily. And in every single sector, each issue will come down to, do I have the freedom to choose or not?
We have a question here from Julie. Thank you both to Kimberly and Foster for their incredible bravery and integrity in making these two movies. What is their opinion on Gassara and its rollout? Am I pronouncing that right? Gassara? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, you're going there. So this, I'll tie this together with QAnon because I didn't get a chance to respond to that one. The Gassara, for people who don't, I don't remember what it stands for. It's initials that basically stand for a movement in the U.S. to return to an honest republic rather than this corporatocracy that was taken over by the multinational bankers back in the 20s and 30s. And it has to do with a global economic reset to asset-backed currencies, not the World Economic Forum reset. Please don't confuse those two things. It's their exact opposites. There's Gassara and Gassara, and then there's different versions of each one. There's been a lot of disinformation about them. I'm not an expert on either one, but it ties in very much with the QAnon thing, which ties in with what's called the White Hats. For those of you who aren't aware, there is a league. It's kind of like the Avengers League in the U.S. military branches and the intelligence agencies, and even to some degree in the government, of people who are really ticked off that they joined for what they thought were good ethical reasons, and then found out they were in some of the most corrupt and brutal institutions on the planet. And so they have been relatively quietly organizing for, well over a decade, probably closer to 20 years. And they don't want to start World War III, but they do want to drain the swamp. They were instrumental in getting Trump elected through spreading the word on what needed to be done and having his alignment in getting that all done. And so this is actually some of the best news that you're going to hear, that in order to defeat and obsolete the Illuminati banking cabal, by whatever name, in order to win that, we need a tremendous truth media campaign worldwide, and that's happening. You guys are doing it, we're doing it, the White Hats are doing it, QAnon's doing it. It's happening all over the place. We also need a tremendous amount of force. We need skilled people to protect us if things get physical. And we need a huge amount of money, because you're literally going up against the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and they're literally the people who are printing money. So that's a tough one. Well, the good news is that the White Hats, they are in charge of actually most of the most powerful military forces on the planet. And they're on the side of freedom and truth. And there have been operating hand in hand with the Asian Dragon Alliance that we mentioned briefly in Thrive 2, and I've got a couple of blogs about them on our website. And the Asian Dragon Alliance, I'll say this as succinctly as I can, is that it's a centuries-old alliance of royal families in China, Japan, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And they are the wealthiest people on the planet by far. They have been collecting and hiding gold for centuries. And there's plenty of evidence. We checked this out for 15 years, and there's no question in my mind about the validity of this. And we know people who've been intimately involved, been there, seen these troves, of football field size troves of gold bullion piled 5 feet high. And there's hundreds of them. And so they also want to get rid of the banking cabal, but they don't want to start World War III. They were actually the ones who loaned the money to the Federal Reserve, the IMF, and the World Bank. Most people don't know this, but the Federal Reserve had agreed to stabilize the global economy and restore the global ecology. Well, obviously, they've done exactly the opposite of both of those. So they have been disenfranchised and cut off back in 2013, I think it was, by the Dragon family. So the Dragon families are working with the White Hats and approached us, and we've gotten to know a number of the top family members very well since 2013. And so Gesara and QAnon are aspects of this movement to bring out the truth about what's really going on the planet, to reset, to have a debt jubilee, reset the global economy based on honest currency and a multipolar world rather than one country running it or one world government running it. So it's a fantastic adventure that you're not going to hear about from the mainstream media, because the mainstream media is owned by those other forces. But I can tell you it's fantastic news. It's proceeding in very exciting ways, and there are things even happening between now and the US election that you will see a lot of the release of these papers that just happened yesterday, and is continuing over the next couple of weeks about the collusions against Trump and so forth. That's a part of the global arrests that will be happening of people who've been involved in international financial fraud, fake wars that are killing millions of people, and global pedophilia rings. And so it's actually a tremendously positive counterforce to the Illuminati, which is emerging. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of disinformation. You can't believe everything you hear, but I can tell you, I would stake my reputation that the fundamentals behind Gesara and behind QAnon and this global alliance is very real and very hopeful.
I want to add one thing just to give a personal feel about this. After Thrive 1 came out, we got an email that came to an email that we didn't even have, but somehow we got this email. I mean, speaking of, well, I don't know where this came from. Anyway, we got an email that said, you got it right up to a certain point, but do you want to know more? There's more to know about, like, behind the Federal Reserve, what Foster just described. So we're like, sure, we want to know more. And the guy who wrote the letter he said, here's who I am. He had a lot of patents, very credible guy, intelligent letter. He said, all right, well, if you want to know more, get in touch here. So we got in touch. Anyway, this began years of a journey. We used to be in the bathtub. We kind of kept a tally of, do you think this is real? Do you think this isn't real? Like, we just were going back and forth trying to figure it out. Finally, they gave us information that we could see, predictions saying, we will make this thing happen, watch a big global event. And lo and behold, it happened. So we actually went to China and around Asia to meet with them, where we got to see firsthand that in fact it was true, and carried the story forward. But it took a lot, and it's been a really exciting adventure. And sometimes a little a
We're-
little risky.
We've been privy to 3 major attempts to release a huge amount of funds for humanitarian purposes, and all of them failed. The first one was a $10.7 billion transfer from Japan into the United States for these projects that was stolen, just outright stolen by one of the major New York banks. The second one was a happened out of Hong Kong, and the head of security for one of the Dragon families, someone got into his hotel room and doused it with arsenic, and he ended up spending 2 months in a Hong Kong hospital. He has recovered, fortunately, but they realized that the alliance didn't have either the financial infrastructure nor the security infrastructure to do these releases yet. And they've been working on that and have accomplished a lot. And the third one was Kimberly and I were invited to Indonesia, to a famous prince there who's the head of all their gold. And we were invited to a week-long celebration that would culminate in the release of huge humanitarian funds for needy projects all over the world. And so we had our security team check it out, and they came back to us quite quickly and said, no, don't go there. This one's not safe. And they identified certain cartels that we know about that were monitoring and would probably interfere with it. So we didn't go, and they did hold the ceremony, and it ended quite abruptly after a couple of days when the Dragon member himself and 2 of our other friends were both poisoned. They were passing around a ceremonial smoke of some sort, and someone had put poison literally on the paper. So the ones who were smoking it started getting very sick. They all also survived, I'm happy to say. But it's a very sobering experience to realize that this isn't just some Hollywood B movie or something like that. This is what's actually going on in the world. So we have to be very careful. And to go back to Trump for just a moment, the head of our security team has been close friends for 30 years with the head of his security team. He doesn't use the Secret Service for his inner circle. I guess he saw the Zapruder film or something like that. So there have been multiple attempts on his life, but Trump, for all of his goofy macho stuff, I am told by very reputable sources that he's fully aligned with this transformation. He's working with the Dragon families and with the White Hats, and very actively, this first thing he did when he came into the White House was initiate this whole project to stop child trafficking. And that is being very successful. A lot of information is going to be coming out on that. Tens of thousands of kids have been rescued. Our security team has been involved in some of that. We know other people who've been called up, former and special forces guys and so forth, who were called up into these actions, who've verified what's going on. So it's tragic that children and the rest of us have been treated the way we have been, but it's super exciting that we're on the cusp of a transformation where the positive forces are so powerful and so aligned. And I'm confident that we're going to win this.
Wow. You guys are just a wealth of information. It's unbelievable.
I hope we don't get you banned, but I told you if somebody asked, we would have to be truthful.
I think we got banned about an hour ago, Foster. So
if you get banned, at least everyone is going to know who doesn't allow the truth out.
Yes, and you can come to thriveon.com. We've just spent 1,000 days building this platform and stuff that we're continuing to shore up so that it will only get more robust and scalable. But our intention is to provide a safe platform for our media and other media to get out. So, and
we also recommend, if you don't know already about MeWe and Brighteon and BitChute and Library, these are all alternative non-suppressed sources. So start moving, you and your friends go to those sources. If Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and so forth, if they're willing to let the truth be told, great, we want to keep using you. It's a fantastic infrastructure. But if you're going to suppress the truth, whether it's about health or children or security or banking or whatever, you're just going to, you're going to be the, what was before Facebook? There was MySpace. You're going to be the MySpace if you don't get with the truth soon.
Veronica Larson is saying, still point, thank you, great humans. Calvin Keats is saying, you have to do a trilogy now. You've got to do part 3. Michelle, we have to give some quick answers here because we are going to go soon, but I'll ask you, Michelle is asking, are you in contact with the Ascended Masters of the Hierarchy, Ashram Shambhala? Any contacts there?
I don't know which Council of Ascended Masters you're talking about. We have our interdimensional sources, and we were contacted after Thrive 1 by numerous channels and spiritual teachers from all over the world saying thank you for finally doing the visual effects to show people how this communication works that we've been trying to describe, and also thanking us for being willing to confront the dark information, the difficult news, because a true spiritual teacher is going to be encouraging their students to deal with the reality, not just, sit around and do la-di-da all the time. The two need to go together. So there are a number of sources that have blessedly assured us that they have our back, and so far, apparently it's working. And we have tremendous respect for the light workers all over the planet and beyond who are doing the interdimensional work that has to go hand in hand with the physical and the media and the health and the energy technologies and all that. So we have tremendous respect for it. If you have particular sources that you want to inform us about, put it in chat or send it to Paul and have him send on to us.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Absolutely. We'll put this recording out there afterwards in as many places as we can, and hopefully we can get it out there to more people. We'll probably have to put it on your portal so it doesn't get censored. So we'll put it there, hopefully. Okay. Just a quick one there from Laura. She's saying about what you're saying about Mr. Trump. Why does he act so strange, though, and insult everybody?
It's so, and do so many things that, like, here's the good and then here's the horrible, and not just like buffoonery, but really like not who you want representing you as a so-called leader. So it's a real mixed bag, that's for sure. But I think it's very important to be able to see through that to what are the actions. That's one thing Foster's done, because I find him so insulting. And we often will open up the binders to say, what are the actions? We have to actually look at what are the policies and actions. And it's not that they're all good, that's for sure, certainly environmentally and in a lot of ways. But to see past the behavior into what actions are being taken. I don't know what you would say about why.
I wrote, after he was elected, you can find this on our website also, I wrote an open letter to Donald Trump. And basically the point of it was I was making a lot of distinctions between the things that he was doing that I thought were aligned with the non-aggression principle, and then the ones that weren't. But my fundamental message to him was, please learn to go beyond being an alpha male, because obviously you're an impressive alpha male. You're rich, you're successful, you're married to one of the most beautiful women in the world. That's all great. But still, if you're making these divisions between the genders, or you're trying to rule people coercively, or you're trying to just win fights rather than actual have win-win situations, then you haven't discovered the next level beyond the alpha male is the gamma male that's actually in touch with their feminine as well, and wouldn't talk about women the way he has, and wouldn't have to get into these petty bullying conversations all the time. At the same time, I have tremendous respect for him using his pugnacious quality in getting rid of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and getting out of the climate change, the Paris Accord, which would have been a disaster. It would have brought in the New World Order, in one fell swoop. He got out of the free trade agreements that were actually not free trade at all. He's taken on the pharmaceuticals. He's taken on the Federal Reserve now. So there's a lot of evidence that he's really on the side of good. He's just not very graceful or advanced in how he goes about it interpersonally.
Well, we're coming to the end here, I think. So I just want to thank Foster and Kimberly for an amazing evening. We've covered so much here. It's been incredible. Just to mention to people to really do go and watch the movie if you haven't seen it yet. It's a brilliant movie. It deserves a couple of watches, I'd say, though you might want to watch it a couple of times. Jennifer's asking about David Icke and the reptilians, but if we go there, we could be here all night. I think you give a kind of a thumbs up to David Icke's work. I think you both mentioned him in the movie.
David Icke is on our list of top 13 most reliable sources.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that he gets it right all the time. And I had a really good discussion with him when I interviewed him for Thrive One, saying, David, we need to distinguish between your personal experience, the overwhelming evidence, and pure speculation. And he was very responsible with us in doing that, and told us that he didn't have direct experience or absolute proof of the reptilians, but for him the evidence was so overwhelming in 30 years of research and contact from over 25 different countries with the proof that they had, that he felt confident in representing it, and admitted that he had been somewhat careless in just saying it as fact rather than representing it as quite compelling evidence.
One thing I want to say about watching the movie, which I hope you all do, is it is a movie you'll probably want to see more than once, because we fit like decades of research and 9 years of adventure into 2.5 hours. And when you subscribe to be part of the conversation, you can see the movie as many times as you want. That's part of what you get with it. But this is my favorite, right? When we actually get to interact and then also hear more from you. So, and that's what happens with the subscription. So we hope that you join and subscribe so that we can continue to be in personal conversation, because it takes all of us. And, you know, we're grateful that we know our part, and we are grateful that we know that's not all of it.
Yeah, I would just echo that as my final thought also, which is that it's so fun just seeing your faces and expressions and interacting with the questions and so forth. It's frustrating not to be able to just take off all the mutes and interact with you for the next 2 days. But that's what we're doing in the Freedom Portal, thriveon.com. So if you're brave enough to hear more and much less courageous enough to really engage and take action, I bet a ton of you are already, or you probably wouldn't be listening to Paul. We really wholeheartedly invite you to join us in that conversation, because it'll be very far out, but it'll also be very grounded and very proactive in terms of solutions, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And we'll definitely be having just personal interaction with you all from there. So
brilliant.
Thank you.
And yeah, please, people, do go to the website and sign on, as the guys say. I think that's great. I just want to thank you again, Foster and Kimberly.
Let me just say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me just say real quickly, I noticed that Calvin had put in a notice about Paul Hellyer. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And we do know him and are in touch. He's a colleague already. Yeah. He's great.
Brilliant.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. I'd like you guys, if you can, just to hang on at the end when people leave, just to have a quick chat with you before you go. I want to thank everybody for sitting in on this chat tonight. We'll make sure this video does the rounds and gets out there as much as we can. I'm just going to invite you all to do a short meditation as we finish off here, and join myself, Foster and Kimberly. Hand on heart again. Close your eyes. Take a couple of breaths into your heart center. Just align with that unified field. Feel yourself connecting to the fullness of who you are. See a light go on in your heart center. Get a sense of yourself as a sovereign being, an empowered being, an aware being. Feel yourself connect with all the other lights on the planet right now. All the other like-minded, open-minded, open-hearted beings. Feel yourself connect on the Zoom call. Feel that connection spread out across the planet, across the universe. Feel it light up. Get a sense of the planet Earth herself, that she's alive, that she has a heart center, that she's ready to move to a different reality. Get a sense of profound peace wrapping the planet right now. And now just tune into your vision for the world, how you would imagine the world to be. And just get a sense that that's happened, that's taken place. And tune into what that feels like in your heart center. See people smiling, connecting, collaborating, laughing, agreeing, not agreeing, but everything being okay. Let that bring a smile to your face, that vision. Hold that vision in your heart center as you open your eyes. Feel yourself grounded in your feet. Just to let you all know, we'll be back on here again in a couple of weeks with another special guest. We'll announce that pretty soon. Thank you all for joining in the Zoom call. I'll invite you all to leave when you're ready, and I'm going to stick around, just have a brief chat with Foster and Kimberly. But thank you all for tuning in tonight. We really appreciate it, folks. Take care. Bye-bye now.